The first assassin arrived at midnight, silent as shadow, certain of his kill. By morning, half the city knew his screams. Humanity had long suspected the Myrrakai wouldn't negotiate forever. When words failed, blades came. And they always aimed at the strongest first. Captain Rylan Vey stood over the body in the infirmary, jaw clenched, hands still trembling from the fight. His chest plate was cracked, shirt soaked in blood, and yet he stood upright. His left lung had collapsed, 3 ribs shattered, and a kidney hung by a shredded vein. By all Myrrakai logic, he should have been dead. Dr. Halen, an old combat medic, muttered as he patched the wounds. "You should be a corpse. No man walks into my medbay missing half his insides." Rylan smirked despite the blood trickling down his chin. "Maybe no man. But humans don't need all the spare parts." The medics chuckled nervously, but there was no humor in his words. The assassins had come expecting fragile prey. Instead, they'd learned the hard truth: humans break, but they don't stop. The command bunker was tense that morning. Screens glowed with intercepted transmissions, each one dripping with alien arrogance. The Myrrakai spoke of corrections, eradication, ensuring compliance. Their strategy was clear: decapitate Earth's leadership, spread fear, force surrender before war even began. Rylan limped into the chamber, ignoring the pain screaming through his body. Officers rose as he entered. Some stared at his bandaged torso in disbelief. Others whispered prayers, as though his survival itself was an omen. "Captain," General Sarek said, voice gravelly, "they sent assassins. Not soldiers. That means they're testing us. They think they can gut us quietly, without a war." Rylan dropped heavily into his seat. "Then we don't whisper back. We make the galaxy hear us scream." The table fell silent. Eyes turned toward him. He wasn't the highest-ranking officer here, but survival carried weight, and in war, legends were as valuable as weapons. Sarek studied him, lips twitching into a grim smile. "Speak your mind, Captain. They think cutting one organ ends a fight," Rylan said, voice cold. "They don't understand what keeps us alive. We've survived famine, plagues, wars of our own making. We've torn ourselves apart and crawled back from worse. Kill our leaders, we rise new ones. Burn our cities, we rebuild in the ash. Rip out a lung." He thumped his chest, ignoring the ache. "And we'll run on one." Murmurs of agreement spread around the table. Officers straightened. The atmosphere shifted from fear to fire. Sarek nodded. "The assassins failed. But more will come. The Myrrakai won't stop." "Then neither do we," Rylan replied. "Let the galaxy see what happens when predators mistake us for prey." Hours later, intelligence confirmed it. Intercepted transmissions revealed 6 more kill teams en route to Earth's colonies, targeting strategists, engineers, diplomats. The Myrrakai wanted humanity crippled before they dared to invade openly. Rylan slammed his fist against the briefing table. "They're not sending armies, they're sending knives. We turn their blades back on them." Myrrakai, a young lieutenant with fire in her eyes, leaned forward. "What's the play, Captain?" He met her gaze, unflinching. "We bait them. Let them think we're weak, scattered. Then we bleed them dry one squad at a time. And when the last assassin falls, we send their heads back as our declaration." The room erupted in sharp, grim laughter. Night fell again, and with it, shadows moved. The second assassin struck the water reclamation plant, knives laced with venom. He found his target, a systems engineer vital to Earth's survival. But the engineer wasn't alone. Rylan was waiting. The fight was brutal, steel against flesh, venom against grit. The assassin's blade tore into his side, burning like acid. Rylan countered with fists and fury, every strike fueled by defiance. When the alien's blade pierced his abdomen, Rylan grabbed the assassin's wrist, yanked the blade deeper into himself, and pulled the creature close enough to whisper. "You thought a missing organ would stop me? Wrong species." He snapped the alien's neck with one brutal twist. The medics found him hours later, barely breathing, blood soaking the ground. Yet when he opened his eyes, he smiled. By dawn, word spread through the colonies like wildfire. The assassins had failed again. Humanity wasn't just surviving, it was fighting back. In the bunker, officers gathered once more. The air was electric, charged with something far greater than fear. Sarek leaned forward. "You've turned their weapons into our rallying cry, Captain. But understand this, the Myrrakai will escalate. They'll stop sending assassins. Next comes fleets." Rylan, pale and stitched with new scars, met his gaze. "Good. Then we stop hiding. We take the fight to them." Mara grinned, her hand tightening on her sidearm. "What's our first move?" Rylan rose, every step heavy but unbroken. His voice carried through the chamber, not just to the officers, but to every soul listening across the comms. "They tried to kill us in silence. They thought we'd fall quietly. Instead, they've woken something they'll never put down. From this day forward, the galaxy will learn, humans don't need all their organs. All we need is one heart still beating, and that's enough to end empires." The room thundered with cheers. Across Earth and its colonies, millions listened. For the first time in generations, humanity didn't feel like prey. It felt like a storm. Cliffhanger ending asterisk. Just as the cheers faded, the alarms blared. Long-range scanners lit up with signatures, an armada slipping from warp. Not assassins. Not knives in the dark. An invasion force. Rylan's eyes burned with fire as he tightened the bandages around his ribs. "Finally," he muttered. "They're done whispering." And with that, humanity's war truly began. The invasion force fell upon Earth's skies like fire raining from gods. Clouds split apart as massive Myrrakai warships punched through the atmosphere, their hulls glowing with sickly green energy. Cities lit with panic as the first bombardments struck coastal fortifications. Captain Rylan Vey stood in the command center, ribs still bound, pain burning in his abdomen with every breath. Yet his eyes were locked on the holographic display as the swarm of ships expanded across the globe. It wasn't an assassination strike anymore. It was conquest. General Sarek's voice rumbled. 2 hours before the first wave breaches ground defenses. Their fleet dwarfs anything we can field. Rylan's jaw tightened. Then we don't fight their numbers. We fight their arrogance. On the surface, chaos spread. Civilians crowded bunkers, transport shuttles screamed across the skies, and Earth's militias scrambled into position. Everyone knew this wasn't a war of attrition. They couldn't match the Myrrakai in ships, numbers, or weapons. But they could outthink them. Myrrakai stormed into the command deck, helmet under her arm, eyes blazing. "Colonel, orbital defense lines report Myrrakai formations moving in predictable sweeps. They're confident. Overconfident. That's their weakness," Rylan said. "They think humans are fragile. They still don't understand." The first clash came over the Atlantic. Myrrakai troop carriers descended in tight wedges, escorted by frigates. Human pilots launched from underwater hangars, bursting from the waves like harpoons. Outnumbered 10-1, they dove straight into the formation, missiles detonating at suicidal range. The command deck shuddered as reports poured in. "Carrier Group Beta destroyed 4 frigates before going dark." Mara clenched her fists. "They're burning themselves alive just to slow the advance." Rylan's voice was low but steady. "Then let the galaxy remember what humans do with borrowed time." Within the hour, Myrrakai troops hit the ground, towering figures armored in living metal, weapons fused to their flesh. They swept into cities with terrifying efficiency, each squad moving like a single organism. But the assassins' lessons had been lost on them. They expected humans to fall with the first blow. They found fire instead. In New Santiago, ambush teams lured Myrrakai columns into collapsed subway tunnels rigged with charges. Entire streets caved in, swallowing troops into firestorms. In Berlin's ruins, militia fighters with improvised explosives crippled their heavy walkers. Every loss cost humanity blood. But every strike reminded the enemy that humans didn't break cleanly. They shattered into jagged pieces that cut back. In the command center, Sarek grunted over reports. "We've stalled them in 3 sectors, but losses are brutal." Civilians are still evacuating north corridors. We can't hold everywhere. Rylan studied the hologram. A pattern emerged in the chaos. The Myrrakai advanced with surgical precision, targeting organ replacement facilities, med bays, and supply depots. They weren't just destroying, they were dissecting. They're still trying to make the same mistake, he muttered. Mara frowned. What mistake? They think we're dependent on every piece of ourselves, Rylan said. He pulled up casualty reports, soldiers fighting with collapsed lungs, with synthetic hearts barely pumping, with missing limbs replaced by crude exoskeletons. They don't understand that survival isn't neat. We keep fighting even when half of us is gone. Sarek's eyes narrowed. You want to show them? Rylan nodded. Not whispers. Broadcasted galaxy-wide. Let every Myrrakai commander see what they're really fighting. Within the hour, footage spread across enemy comms. Human soldiers fighting through blood-soaked streets, men and women missing arms, patched with crude braces, still charging forward. A medic with a missing eye holding the line with a rifle. Rylan himself, bandaged and bleeding, leading squads into fire. The Myrrakai intercepted it. They laughed at first. Then the laughter stopped. Because the humans didn't fall. Even mortally wounded, they kept rising. It wasn't efficient. It wasn't logical. It was terrifying. The enemy shifted tactics. Instead of surgical strikes, they unleashed brute force. Plasma storms leveled entire districts. Bioengineered horrors, beasts with claws like razors, were dropped into refugee corridors. Mara barked over the comms as screams filled the background. They're targeting civilians now. They want fear more than victory. Then we turn fear into fire, Rylan said, gripping the comm. His voice carried across every channel, raw and unyielding. They think we're machines, fail when one piece breaks. They think we're fragile bodies, easy to cut apart. But humanity isn't bone and organ. Humanity is will. And will doesn't die when the flesh does. So stand, fight, bleed, and if you must fall, fall biting. The comms erupted in roars. Soldiers who had been retreating turned, weapons blazing. Night fell over the battlefield. Fires painted the horizon, smoke choking the stars. Rylan and Mara led a strike team into the ruins of Hongxia, where a Myrrakai command node pulsed with green light. It was a risk, deep behind enemy lines, but they needed a victory to shift momentum. The ruins crawled with alien sentries. Rylan's team moved like shadows, each step silent, hearts pounding. They slipped into the node's perimeter, planting charges along conduits pulsing with alien energy. A sentry spotted them. The silence shattered. Gunfire erupted, streets lighting with plasma. Mara cut down 2 soldiers before diving behind rubble. They know we're here. Good, Rylan growled, pressing the detonator. Explosions ripped through the command node, fire consuming alien machinery. The structure collapsed in a wave of green flame. The Myrrakai fell into disarray, formations staggering without orders. Human militias struck hard, driving them back street by street. For the first time since the invasion began, the enemy retreated. But victory cost them. Half the strike team lay dead in the ruins. Rylan's wounds reopened, blood soaking his armor. As medics dragged him back, Mara knelt beside him, fury and grief warring in her eyes. You can't keep burning yourself alive to prove a point. Rylan coughed, but his eyes burned bright. This isn't about points. It's about teaching them what fear really is. Back in orbit, Myrrakai admirals seethed. Their assassins had failed. Their armies had bled. And now, their enemy was not collapsing but hardening. The reports came in. Humans kept fighting with missing lungs, with shattered bodies, with wounds that should have killed them. The Dominion Council met in fury. They are not like the others, one commander hissed. They should be corpses, yet they fight like demons. Another whispered. If they fight like this broken, what will they do whole? On Earth, battered survivors lit fires in the ruins, a defiant glow against the dark. Humanity had endured the first wave, and though the scars ran deep, they had won something far greater than a battle. They had forced the enemy to doubt. And doubt was the first crack in any empire. Cliffhanger ending asterisk. As dawn broke, long-range sensors flared again. Not another fleet. Something bigger. A ship the size of a continent, its shadow eclipsing the stars. Mara stared at the display, her voice barely a whisper. That's not an invasion force. That's an executioner. The executioner's ship descended like a shadow-given form, vast enough to blot out entire continents. Its surface rippled with organic plating, veins of green fire glowing through cracks in its hull. The Myrrakai hadn't come merely to conquer now, they had come to erase. In the command center, silence reigned as officers stared at the display. The ship dwarfed Earth's orbital defenses. Entire fleets could hide within its belly. Even General Sarek, who had weathered decades of war, stood rigid, lips pressed in a thin line. Captain Rylan Vey gripped the edge of the console, knuckles white, ribs screaming beneath his bindings. He didn't look away. That thing isn't a weapon, he said, voice low. It's a message. They want us to watch ourselves burn. Myrrakai stepped forward, helmet under her arm, eyes fixed on the monstrous silhouette. Then we don't give them the spectacle they want. The executioner's ship's first strike vaporized the city of Myrrakai in seconds. A lance of energy carved through concrete and steel as if the world were made of paper. Millions gone, reduced to ash. The comms exploded with panic. Sarek turned sharply to Rylan. We can't match that. If they fire again, we'll lose half the continent. Do you have a plan, Captain, or just another speech? Rylan didn't flinch at the bite in his tone. He stared at the glowing beast above the earth and felt something heavy settle in his chest. Not despair. Resolve. They think they've seen the worst of us. They haven't. We're going to tear their executioner apart, from the inside. The plan was madness. Humanity's fleets couldn't pierce the executioner's hull, but Rylan didn't intend to fight from outside. He proposed boarding it, dragging a crippled carrier packed with explosives into its hangar bay, fighting through its living corridors, and planting charges at its core. Sarek slammed a hand on the table. That's suicide. Rylan met his gaze, unblinking. So was surviving assassins. So was holding Berlin. So was standing against a fleet that outnumbered us 10-1. And yet we're still here. Mara leaned in. He's right. Every battle we've won was because we fought the impossible. If we wait here, Earth dies screaming. If we take the fight up there, we might make them bleed. Silence fell again. Then Sarek exhaled, slow and heavy. God help us all. Prepare the carrier. The old vessel they chose was a ruin itself, a carrier from the first colonial wars. Hull patched with scavenged steel, engines coughing smoke, decks scarred with rust. But it still flew. Rylan led the boarding squad, Mara at his side, engineers rigging charges, medics who had become fighters through necessity. Fewer than 200 souls. As they strapped in, Rylan addressed them. His voice wasn't loud, but every word carried like iron. They came to cut us apart organ by organ. They thought we'd collapse when the first piece failed. They didn't understand. Humanity doesn't survive because we're whole. We survive because we refuse to stop moving, no matter what's missing. Today, we show them the cost of underestimating us. The soldiers roared back, fists pounding armor. The carrier launched, engine shrieking as it clawed into orbit. Myrrakai frigates swarmed, but escort fighters from Earth's last defense wing drew them off, sacrificing themselves to clear a path. Plasma fire hammered the carrier, tearing through its plates, but it kept climbing. Brace! Mara shouted as the executioner's ship's tractor beam gripped them, dragging them into its colossal hangar. The carrier slammed down hard, metal screaming. Rylan was the first to his feet. Move! Plant charges on the hull. We're burning this thing from both ends. The Myrrakai were waiting. The hangar bay pulsed with organic growths, walls lined with weapon nodes that throbbed like hearts. Alien soldiers poured from the shadows, shrieking, armored flesh glistening under the eerie green light. The humans charged. Gunfire roared, grenades burst, screams echoed. Rylan fought like a storm, blade in one hand, rifle in the other, blood seeping from reopened wounds. Mara was a blur beside him, cutting down enemies with ruthless precision. Every meter of progress was paid for in blood. "Charges set!" an engineer shouted, only to be torn down by a Myrrakai claw a heartbeat later. Mara put a bullet through the beast's skull and dragged the detonator from the dead man's grip. Rylan pressed forward, leading his dwindling squad deeper into the ship. The corridors twisted like veins, walls pulsing with sickly life. Every breath tasted like rot. At the court chamber, the truth of the executioner revealed itself. A massive crystalline heart pulsed at the ship's center, cables and veins feeding from it like roots. Energy surged through it, the source of its devastating power. Rylan stared at it, chest heaving. "That's their heart. Tear it out, the body dies." The squad spread out, planting charges around the pulsing crystal. Myrrakai soldiers poured in through the walls, the final defense desperate and unrelenting. The fight became a slaughter. One by one, humans fell. Mara was struck across the shoulder, armor splitting. Rylan dragged her back, firing until his rifle clicked dry, then swinging it like a club. A massive Myrrakai champion advanced, towering above them, voice a guttural snarl. "You break your bodies for nothing. You die incomplete." Rylan staggered forward, blood soaking his bandages. He spat crimson and raised his blade. "Maybe incomplete," he said, voice raw. "But even broken, we're enough to end you." He lunged. The champion's blade pierced his side, but Rylan drove his own straight into its throat. Both collapsed in a heap of blood and fury. Mara crawled to him, hands shaking. "Stay with me, Captain. Don't you dare stop now." He forced a smile, blood staining his teeth. "Doesn't matter if I stop. What matters is they do." He pressed the detonator into her hand. "Make it count." She shook her head, tears streaking grime down her face. "Not without you. Humanity doesn't need me," he whispered. "It just needs one heart beating. Today, that's yours." The chamber shook violently as the charges armed. Mara dragged herself up, fury burning through her grief. She shouted to the last survivors. "Fall back! Now!" They ran, what few remained, stumbling through collapsing corridors as alarms shrieked. Behind them, the crystalline heart began to crack, light spilling out in blinding waves. Mara turned once more, looking back at the chamber where Rylan still lay. His body was broken, but his hand clutched the blade still buried in the alien champion. He had died standing, defiant to the end. She whispered, "I'll carry it. Always." Then she ran. The survivors barely made it to the hangar before the charges detonated. The executioner's ship convulsed, green fire ripping through its veins. Explosions cascaded outward, tearing its colossal form apart from within. From Earth's surface, millions looked up as the shadow that blotted the stars fractured, burning like a dying sun. Pieces rained down, harmless, already dead before they reached the ground. The executioner was gone. Humanity lived. In the aftermath, silence settled over the battered command center. Reports trickled in, the Myrrakai fleet retreating, fractured without their executioner, commanders hesitant, uncertain. For the first time, the enemy doubted. Mara, arm in a sling, stood before the survivors of command. Her voice carried steady, strong. Rylan forced himself to his feet, pain etched into every line of his face. "Then we show them humanity doesn't die quietly. They tried to dissect us. They thought we'd fall apart piece by piece. They didn't understand. Humanity doesn't die neat. We fight until the last breath, and even then, we make it count. Captain Rylan Vey showed them what it means to be human. Now it's our duty to carry that forward. Not just survival. Victory." Cheers erupted, ragged but fierce. Across Earth, across the colonies, humanity rose from its scars with fire in its veins. Above, the wreckage of the executioner's ship drifted silently, a graveyard in orbit. And within that silence echoed the lesson the Myrrakai would never forget. Humans don't need all their organs. They just need enough left to keep fighting.